Hey traveler, welcome to the ByteBeat Switch tutorial. In here, you'll learn what the ByteBeat Switch is, how to get it, how to set it up, how to use its UI and the various trigger conditions it offers. You'll also learn about beats in music, and finally, you will get to hear some tips and tricks that should make your life with ByteBeat Switch a bit easier. I will not talk much about ByteBeat devices in this guide, so if you are more interested in knowing how they work first, go to the tutorial on the upper right or check the video's description. So to start off, ByteBeat Switch is a gadget that allows you to turn on lights and other electrical devices by using patterns on ByteBeat devices. And to do so, a ByteBeat Switch and a ByteBeat device must be connected with a ByteBeat cable, as this cable allows the switch to read the patterns on the connected ByteBeat device. To be able to build ByteBeat switches, you'll need to have the blueprints unlocked. To do so, go to the Construction Research Station in the Space Anomaly, and under the Technology Modules section, you will see the ByteBeat Switch blueprint. You'll also see the ByteBeat cable blueprint here, which also needs to be unlocked. You can buy the ByteBeat Switch blueprint for 2 salvage data, while the ByteBeat cable blueprint is free. Of course, you will need to have all the previous blueprints unlocked as well. Okay, now that we have our blueprints, we can find both the ByteBeat Switch and the ByteBeat cable by opening our build menu, going to Tech, selecting Power and Industry, and then Technology. To build a single ByteBeat Switch, you'll need 25 ferrodust and 15 ionized cobalt. And you can build as many as you like, as they don't have build number limitations. To make a ByteBeat Switch work, you just put it down, you connect one side to a power source, a battery in this case, you connect the other side to the device you want to control, in this case we'll use a light floor, and then you must use the ByteBeat cable to connect the switch with the chosen ByteBeat device. Now in regards to power, it does not matter which side of the switch is connected to the power grid and which side is connected to our light floor, as long as they are connected to separate wire sockets on the switch. Note that to work properly, the switch must be powered all the time. You can power it from a separate power source like I did here with the battery, or you can connect it to another power device, like our ByteBeat device here, as long as the switch is always supplied with power. Now let's talk a bit more about the ByteBeat cable. This cable can only be connected to special sockets marked by musical note icons. And these sockets become automatically visible when you select the ByteBeat cable in the build menu, so you'll be able to immediately see where to connect your ByteBeat cable to. You'll know that the ByteBeat cable is connected properly when you see a magenta line between the switch and the ByteBeat device. If these two devices are close to one another, the entire magenta line will be visible. If the ByteBeat switch and the ByteBeat device are further apart, this line will start to fade away from both ends and you'll just see its beginning or end on both connected devices. Now, some important things to consider when setting up your devices. If you don't connect the ByteBeat device and the ByteBeat switch with the ByteBeat cable, the switch won't work. If you connect the power source and the device you wish to control, in this case our light floor, to the same electric socket on the ByteBeat switch, the switch won't work. If you connect the ByteBeat switch to a device you want to control that's already powered, the switch won't work. And finally, when the setup is done, you can check if the switch is communicating with the connected ByteBeat device. Just let the ByteBeat device play any pattern or music, go to the switch, enter the switch UI, and you should be able to see yellow dots appearing all over the place. Among other things, these dots mean that the switch is receiving signal from the connected ByteBeat device. If there are no yellow dots appearing, something went wrong, and I would advise to review the setup section of the video from the start. Now, you also probably noticed that there are groups of 8 slots or dots or circles where the yellow dots appear. These stand for the ByteBeat devices and they represent the maximum amount of ByteBeat devices allowed per base, which is 8. The lighter, gray dots represent ByteBeat devices that are connected or synced, while the darker dots are unused slots and they represent the missing ByteBeat devices or the ByteBeat devices that are not currently synced in. For example, if we have built just one ByteBeat device and connected it to our ByteBeat switch, there will be 1 lighter and 7 darker slots. If we have synced 2 devices, there will be 2 lighter slots and 6 darker ones, etc. Well, you get the logic. One thing to note here is that the ByteBeat switch will remember the order of how you built and synced your ByteBeat devices. To To demonstrate, I've synced 7 ByteBeat devices in order, from left to right. They will play a C major scale, where the first C note will play on the first ByteBeat device, while the last, 7th ByteBeat device will play the final B note. If you enter the ByteBeat Switch UI after you've connected your ByteBeat Switch, you'll notice how the active slots will be nicely ordered and how the notes will activate in order as the scale plays out. Take a look. Also note that this order will now be the same for each additional switch you want to connect with these ByteBeat devices. Okay, now that we're done with the H slots or dots or circles, however you want to call them, let's focus on the main elements of the ByteBeat Switch UI, which are the trigger conditions. They basically tell our light floor when we'd like to activate it. And there are 4 types of trigger conditions: on bass note, on arpeggio note, on rhythm, and on beat trigger conditions. On bass note conditions, trigger the ByteBeat Switch on specific notes. You will notice that the colors are the same as the ones on ByteBeat devices, and this is one way of knowing which notes to activate the ByteBeat Switch on. So for our C scale, the notes will be the same as on our ByteBeat device: C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. Now let's say we'd like our light to turn on every other note on our scale, on the note D, F, and A. To do this, we'll select the D, F, and A notes on the Switch UI. Now when the notes are selected, we can see that the light turns on exactly when these notes play out. And this is how all trigger conditions work. You simply select the ones on which you want your control device, the light floor in this case, to turn on too. You can select multiple trigger conditions at once, as there's no limitations on how many trigger conditions can be selected on a single ByteBeat switch. Basically, if you want, you can select every single trigger condition on the ByteBeat Switch UI. And one more thing to consider about the on bass note trigger condition is that you'll also use this condition if you have arpeggio notes and you like the light to blink as the arpeggiator plays all of them, like this. Now you're probably asking, why do I need to use this when there's the arpeggio note trigger condition right there? Well, as you already know, the arpeggiator divides one note into many smaller ones. And in case you want the light floor to turn on a specific small note, the on arpeggio note trigger condition is what you'll use. Okay, and now you're probably asking, how am I supposed to know which note is which when they play out so fast? Well, it's simple. You'll see a yellow dot appear next to a note when that specific arpeggio note is playing. And to see the individual notes more clearly, you just have to slow down the tempo on the ByteBeat device your ByteBeat Switch is connected to. When the tempo is slowed down, the single arpeggio note duration is increased, so individual notes become much more visible. So now that we can see individual arpeggio notes, if we want our light floor to light up every time the arpeggiator plays the C note, we'll mark the C note under the on arpeggio note trigger condition. Also, we'll reset the tempo to its previous value. The next trigger condition is the on rhythm trigger condition, which allows the switch to trigger our light floor with ByteBeat drum patterns. As on ByteBeat's rhythm sequencer, the top slot stands for the hi-hat, the middle slot represents the snare drum, while the bottom slot represents the bass drum signals coming from the connected ByteBeat device. You simply select one slot or more depending on which drums you want your light floor to turn on to. For example, if we want our light floor to light up on the snare pattern we set up, we'll select the middle slot. If we set up a drum pattern, and if we want our light to light up on all 3 drums, we'll select all the slots so the light floor will start to light up like this. And finally, we've arrived to the last, the on beat trigger condition, which, as the name states, activates chosen devices on one or more beats coming from ByteBeat devices. To understand this one a bit better, we need to understand what a beat actually is. By definition, a beat is a basic unit of time which we can use to measure our music speed or tempo. If you watched my ByteBeat device tutorial, you may remember that the tempo is measured in BPM, or beats per minute, which, as the name states, counts the total number of beats that fit into 1 minute. Now in No Man's Sky ByteBeat, beats are grouped in sets of 4, and these 4 beats constantly repeat. This means that the beat pattern will always be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. To make the notion of a beat more clear, try imagining the sound of a healthy beating heart. You can probably notice that the heart beats in patterns. If we were to mark the first heartbeat with a number 1 and the second with a number 2, the pattern would be 1, 2, 1, 2. And this pattern is always on repeat. Well, at least until the person suffers from a heart condition or, stops living. But to go back to our ByteBeat, the same is happening there. But the beats are twice as many. So instead of 1, 2, 1, 2, imagine a heart that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is the beat pattern of our ByteBeat. And as with our normal heart, that will always beat 1, 2, 1, 2, no matter whether we hear it or not, no matter what we are doing, the ByteBeat will always beat 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, no matter what's happening with the melody that's playing on it. And to demonstrate this, I've made a little tune, which is muted right now, and I've built these 4 light floors with numbers on them. The idea is to make each light floor light up when their corresponding beat hits. So the light floor number 1 will light up with the first beat. The light floor number 2 will turn on when the second beat is up, the third light floor will do the same with the third beat, and the fourth light floor will turn up on the last 4th beat. If we take a look at the ground, we'll see numbers from 1 to 4, which we'll use to mark our ByteBeat switches. I'll build the first switch here and connect one side to the power grid. In this case, I'm just going to connect it to our ByteBeat devices as they are always powered. After connecting the switch with power, we're going to connect the other end of the switch to the light floor number 1. And then I'm going to select the ByteBeat cable and connect the switch to one of the music note slots on our ByteBeat devices. These ByteBeat devices are all glued or stuck together, which means that they are all synced or synchronized. So it does not matter which device I connect the ByteBeat cable to, as ByteBeat devices that are synced make the ByteBeat switch read the music patterns on all of them, no matter which device I connect the switch to. After this is done, the switch should be receiving signal from the ByteBeat devices, as we can see when we open the switch UI, with the yellow dots popping up all over the place. But right now, I'll only mark the first beat on the on beat trigger. And now that we have all this connected, the light floor will light up on the first beat. We'll basically go over the same process for switch number 2, but this time I'll turn the switch the opposite way, to demonstrate that it will work just as fine, as it does not matter which wire is connected to the power grid and which wire is connected to the light floor. After connecting the wires, we'll connect the switch and the ByteBeat devices with a ByteBeat cable. And then we'll enter the ByteBeat switch UI and select the second beat. With this done, our second light will light up on the beat number 2. We'll go over the same process with the rest 2 ByteBeat switches, only I'll select the beat number 3 and 4 in the switch UI respectively. Okay, we've finished with our setup, so let's take a look. Notice how the melody will change as the tune goes on, but the lights will always turn on the same way, with the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 pattern. And one last thing about beats. The only way we can tinker a bit with the beat is by adjusting the tempo. The pattern will stay the same, but the beats will be slower if the tempo is slowed down and faster if the tempo is sped up. If we go back to our heart analogy, you know that we cannot change a healthy heart's 1-2-1-2-1-2 beat pattern, but we can slow it down if we are, say, relaxing, and we can speed it up if we are exercising, for example. We can do the same with our beat. If we slow down the tempo, the beat will slow down. If we raise the tempo, the beat will speed up. And that wraps up the beat and heart comparison. Next, we'll cover a few tips and tricks for working with ByteBeat switches. Tip number 1. Multiple ByteBeat switches can be connected to a single ByteBeat device with ByteBeat cables, but not the other way around, meaning that multiple ByteBeat devices cannot be connected to the same ByteBeat switch with a ByteBeat cable. Tip number 2. Setting the envelope to slowly raise the note volume on a ByteBeat device will not translate to the triggered light. Instead of gradually increasing or decreasing its brightness, the light will just instantly turn on when triggered and turn off after that, just as it normally does. Tip number 3. There is an indicator on the ByteBeat switch showing its activity. A green light will appear when the switch is being triggered. When idle, the light indicator will be red. And tip number 4. ByteBeat switches can be stacked. In addition to the switches, you can also automatically add and stack noise boxes and light boxes this way as well. And finally, now that you're full of newfound knowledge, but in case you don't know where to start with it, here is an idea of what can be done with ByteBeat switches and lights. If you'd like to see this whole music video, take a look at the video on the right hand side. However, if there's more learning energy left in you, and you crave for more ByteBeat knowledge goodies, check out the video on the left where Borter94 will teach you how to create animations using ByteBeat. Toodles, and see you on the next vid!